Young men are walking into a trap they cannot see. They are disappearing, quietly, completely, swallowed by a trap entirely disguised as strength. They're walking blindly toward their own quiet erasure. There is no loud alarm, there is no warning sign, just a slow, methodical slipping away from the systems that actually govern the world. In this explainer, we are mapping a structural fatality. We're looking at a pattern that ruins lives before they even fully begin. They are told that strength means needing no one. This is the lie. They're told independence is the highest possible form of power, that asking for absolutely nothing and offering nothing will somehow deliver everything. But that belief, it's not strength. It is a slow, methodical form of self-destruction. The illusion of absolute independence is a poison. The men who cling to it do not rise above the pack. They vanish.
So this leaves a massive, glaring question. What is the one skill they absolutely refuse to learn? There is a single competence that moves the world, a secret lever of power. Yet most young men reject it outright. They treat it as optional, worse, they treat it as manipulative or weak. This single refusal sets the trap in motion, because the data already shows exactly what happens when you refuse to learn the machinery of human interaction. That skill is influence. Not force, not isolation. Influence.
Section 1. The biological price. The cost of isolation. When young men reject persuasion and influence, they don't just lose arguments. They sever their own social capital, and the body keeps the score, even when the conscious mind insists it's completely fine. Isolation is not neutral. It is biologically expensive. When you cut yourself off from the ability to guide other minds, you cut yourself off from survival. Listen to the sheer terror of this number. 15. One massive meta-analysis proves exactly what this isolation costs. Chronic loneliness raises the risk of premature death by the exact same margin as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. This is the biological price. Your body registers the lack of influence, the lack of connection, as a terminal threat. Refusing to learn the language of influence isn't taking the moral high ground. It's a biological death sentence.
Decades of longitudinal studies confirm this escalating nightmare. Isolation is structurally fatal. These longitudinal studies track elevated risks directly tied to low social connection. We're talking depression, cardiovascular disease, early mortality, substance use, suicide. Research on male suicide and substance use shows elevated risk precisely among men who report low social support and high self-reliance beliefs. The very belief they think makes them strong is exactly what is killing them.
Section 2. The architecture of influence. 4 pillars of survival. Surviving this invisible trap requires immediate adaptation. It requires mastering the psychology of persuasion through a rigid 4-part framework. You cannot brute force your way through the world. The ability to understand another mind well enough to guide it without breaking it is literally the only way forward. You must systematically construct influence through 4 rigid steps: observation, knowledge, the unconscious, and patience. Men who treat this sequence as essential gain absolute options in life. Men who treat it as optional lose all leverage. Let's break down how this machinery actually operates.
The first fracture appears in observation. Observation means entering environments as a student of behavior. You have to notice what people reward, notice what they avoid, notice those tiny inconsistencies between what they say and what they do. Decades of research in social psychology show that accurately reading another human being demands deliberate attention and massively reduced self-focus. But loud, performative men remain completely blind to motives. They talk first, they prove, they perform. When the ego is loud, the data completely disappears. The outcome is absolute rejection.
Step 2 is knowledge. You have to understand the mechanics of how minds actually move. Influence without understanding is clumsy. It backfires. Remaining ignorant of these mechanics doesn't make you pure, it makes you permanently ineffective. The alternative to knowledge is relying on luck or force, and both of those run out very quickly. You cannot win a game if you refuse to learn the physics of how the board operates.
The foundation of that knowledge relies on 6 principles: reciprocity, consistency, social proof, authority, liking, and scarcity. These are the gears the world runs on. They dictate human choice across controlled experiments and real-world settings alike. Ignoring them is fatal. You must learn them, or you will remain a permanent victim to them. The systems of the world run on these exact gears.
Step 3 targets the deepest layer, the unconscious. People do not run on the story they tell about themselves. They run on older, quieter material. Hidden drives like early experiences of powerlessness, suppressed aggression, hunger for recognition, and the fear of exclusion. Modern research on implicit bias and dual-process thinking, the proven fact that our brains make snap, emotional decisions long before logic kicks in, confirms that a massive share of choices happens entirely below conscious awareness. If you cannot read these quiet undercurrents, you are permanently outmatched.
The final pillar is patience. Influence compounds over time. It's a sequence, not a single move. Studies on delayed gratification and long-term relationship formation prove that rushed attempts at control immediately signal a threat. The person who demands results too quickly signals neediness. They trigger immediate psychological defenses. They produce resistance and distrust. Impatient men burn through opportunities. They appear intense for a brief moment, and then they become completely forgettable. Section 3. Applied analysis. 2 paths. There are only 2 ways this plays out. It is entirely a matter of psychological literacy. You are either reading the room or you are being read by it. The choices made in those 4 pillars forge 2 completely different types of men. On the left, we have the predictable man. He never learns to read the undercurrents. He's ego-loud, he rushes, he is totally blind to motives. Predictable men are remarkably easy to manage and incredibly easy to discard. Now on the right, the influential man. Observant, maps hidden drives, builds familiarity slowly. The influential man gains immense leverage in critical options. He offers what the other person wants without even announcing the exchange. This isn't mind control, it's alignment. Section 4. The compounding consequences. The collapse. The failures of the predictable man spread. They infect absolutely everything. When you treat connection as a weakness, the deficit begins to register. And by the time the gap is wide, catching up requires far more effort than simply learning the material early would have cost. Here is the exact timeline of that collapse. Years 1 to 5. Stalled career progress. Networks absolutely do not form around men who refuse to engage. Promotions go to those who align interests. Years 5 to 10. Romantic failure. Attraction and commitment demand calibrated influence. You end up alone, with less choice. Years 10 and beyond. Internal collapse. The massive gap between the absolute independence you were promised and the brutal isolation you actually receive produces a corrosive, quiet rage. The psychology of persuasion is a language. Let me repeat that. It is a language. Those who never learn this language remain functionally mute in the systems that decide their outcomes. You are silenced by your own refusal to learn the vocabulary of power. A functionally mute man cannot negotiate his survival. Conversations feel off, opportunities stall out, every relationship drains far more energy than it gives. Section 5. The final choice. Play the game. The world continues to run on persuasion, whether you understand it or not. Refusing the knowledge doesn't mean you escape the game. It simply guarantees that you play the game badly. You do not become self-made. You become isolated. And you'll reframe that isolation as strength, just so you can ignore the pain, until the pain is too loud to ignore. The path of deliberate study and patience doesn't remove adversity, but it gives you the absolute tools to move through it. The other path? It produces men who are free in theory and completely trapped in practice. Look at the data. Look at the vanishing social capital. The trap is already sprung. Which version of the future are most young men already choosing blindly? Keep your eyes open. The erasure is happening right now.